Morning. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Louisville, Kentucky. We're really glad you're here. You know, they always say being a woman is really, really hard work. That's mostly because you have to spend so much time dealing with men. So I want to thank you this morning for allowing me to take a few minutes and share some thoughts about where we are and the way forward. The National Federation of Republican Women is extremely important. All of you are important. I don't know where we would be without you. For more than 7 decades now, this organization has played an absolutely essential role in electing Republican candidates and in making sure our principles and policies make sense and are implemented at every level of government across the country. And so I just want to start by thanking all of you for what you do for our party and for our country. You've come to Louisville this weekend for a simple reason. You all love our country. And you want to make it better for our families and for our communities. And it's because of your loyalty, your wisdom, your hard work, and your passion that we rise or fall as a party. And by extension, that we rise or fall as a nation. But if I could just make a little plug for one particular cause that's dear to my heart, I hope you'll do everything you can to take back the Senate next year and make me the majority leader of the Senate. The stakes, as you know, are extremely high. The president wants nothing more than to finish his second term the way he started his first one, with Democratic majorities in both the House and the Senate. And you know, during that period, they did a lot of damage to our country. They took a lot of steps in turning us into a Western European welfare state. We stopped them in November of 2010 with the national restraining order that the American people issued. But there's nothing they'd like better than to have the kind of control they had the first 2 years and continue to march us off the cliff in the wrong direction. And we're not going to let that happen, are we? I want to just tell you this. I'm going to fight for the things that the women of Kentucky and all across America consistently say they want, but never seem to get from Democrats in Washington. What they want, of course, is a strong and vibrant economy, abundant jobs, better, less expensive health care, quality, affordability, and choice in education, and a government that, above all, lives within its means. That's our goal, and with your help we'll get there, but it won't be easy because our friends on the left also know that the stakes are high, and they're pulling out all the stops. They've got all their big money donors in Hollywood lining up to help, and they won't stop at anything to smear Republicans and distract folks from their real agenda, which is far, far left. So we've got our work cut out for us in the months ahead. And that's why this morning I wanted to come down here and share some thoughts on exactly what it is we're all up against, about some of the opportunities that lie ahead, and about the bright spots that I see on the horizon. But first I want to acknowledge a couple of people. I'll start with my wife. You're going to have a chance to hear from her later. She is, of course, tough, brilliant, beautiful, and incredibly accomplished. So I know what you're all wondering. What's she doing with a guy like me? And I've never been able to come up with a good answer for that. But here's something else about my wife. She's a genuine American success story. Some of you know this, but I bet a lot of you don't. Her mother and dad were young people in mainland China. The Japanese attacked, and they literally were dodging the Japanese. And then as they got to be teenagers and young adults, there was the Communist Revolution in China. And Elaine's mom and dad were lucky enough to escape from that and make it over to Taiwan. Elaine's dad was an ambitious young man. He wanted to realize his dreams. And everybody in America knows there's only one place where you can truly realize your dreams. So imagine this. He came to America in his early 20s, worked 3 jobs, waited for 3 years to bring Elaine's mom and Elaine and 2 of her sisters over. They didn't have the money for an airline ticket. They came over in a freighter, down in the hull of a freighter. They were the only passengers on there other than the crew and bulk commodities. She went into the 3rd grade, not speaking a word of English, graduated from Harvard Business School, was the longest serving member of President Bush's cabinet, the only woman from Kentucky ever to be in a cabinet. And that, my friends, is the American dream. All of us are the descendants of risk takers. Somebody who had enough gumption to get up from wherever they were in the world to go to America and to seek opportunity. And I worry today that those same opportunities are not available because of what this administration has done to this country. The Europeanization of America. Most of our ancestors came from Europe to get away from it. But the good news, of course, is it's not too late. It's not too late. I also want to acknowledge Lynn Cornicky and thank her for her leadership. Lynn's had a pretty impressive career in her own right out in Arizona, done a great job at the helm of the NFRW over the past 2 years. I wish you all the best in the remaining months of your term. And the last time Louisville hosted this event, President Reagan delivered a speech in which he described the NFRW and its members as not only the pride and joy, but also the heart and soul of the Republican Party. Some things never change. But one thing's changed for the better since 1983, and that's the number of women who now hold elective office and other prominent leadership roles in our country. 30 years ago, this very day, the Senate unanimously confirmed the first woman member of the Supreme Court from Arizona. Now, I must say a few of her decisions I found perplexing. But it was certainly a momentous day when women claimed their rightful role on the Supreme Court. There are 3 women on it today. I only wish they were Republicans. When President Reagan spoke at this convention 3 decades ago, there were two women in the United States Senate, both Republicans, and 9 Republican women in the House. Today, there are double the number of Republican women in the Senate and more than double the number of Republican women in the House. Now, I must add, unfortunately, Democrats have started to outpace us in getting women elected to federal office. But I'm confident that after 6 years of Barack Obama, we ought to be able to change that. This president's policies, especially for women, have been a disaster. That's not the story you get in the media, of course. As you all know, they tend to view women as some monolithic block whose primary concerns conveniently line up with the most liberal elements of the agenda of the Washington Democrats. But when I see data that shows American women today are suffering record levels of poverty, substantially higher than men, I have to think they're waking up to the effects of this president's liberal economic policies, which are very bad for women. And when I see surveys that say women make about 80% of the health care decisions in the country, you can't tell me they support the liberal agenda in Washington, because as I stand here this morning, right now, the centerpiece of that agenda is wreaking havoc on households and businesses all across America. And you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about Obamacare, a law that Washington Democrats muscled through Congress against the will of the American people, and not one member of your party in the House and not one member of your party in the Senate voted for Obamacare. And before you sit down, I want to tell you, we're not going to rest until we pull it out root and branch. Give me a Republican Senate, and I guarantee you we'll do it. Here in Louisville and everywhere else, livelihoods are being upended as a direct result of this awful law. And guess what? If the White House doesn't think you're important enough or politically useful enough, tough luck. What I'm talking about is they do waivers for their friends. You know, waivers for their friends. You may have noticed recently a person I don't think I've ever referred to in a speech in my entire political career, Jimmy Hoffa, the head of the Teamsters Union. Here's what Jimmy Hoffa had to say about it. Mr. President, you're destroying the 40-hour work week and my Cadillac health care plan. Something's got to be done. So they all went down to the White House Friday a week ago. The president said, not much, but watch out. I figure some waivers heading our way, some special carve-out for his buddies. My view is, if Obamacare is going to be inflicted on the American people, we all need to be in the same boat. After all, the biggest backers of the bills are the ones that are seeking the get out of jail free cards. Oh, no, you mean it applies to me? That's why I said it needs to be pulled out root and branch. Honestly, Republican women, it's going to take a Republican Senate to do that. And you're looking at the guy that's going to lead the charge just as soon as you give me a Republican Senate. It's interesting that 6 out of 10 American women oppose most or all of this law. And that's, of course, just another reason why it needs to be repealed. So I want to thank you for everything you're doing in this particular fight. Obviously, it's not easy, but if we stay focused and keep hammering away at all the ways this law is hurting families, hurting businesses, undermining opportunity and growth and quality and choice and health care, then ultimately we'll win. Because look at it this way. Something that can't work won't. If it can't work, it won't. It's hard to predict today exactly how this monstrosity comes to an end, but I guarantee you it will. Republicans are entirely unified when I say that this law belongs on the dustbin of legislative history. There are ways to improve the American healthcare system, none of which were addressed in this 2,700-page bill, backed up by 20,000 pages of regulations. I made a speech in Washington earlier this year, and behind me on the podium, I had the first 20,000 pages of regulations. By the way, you had to put it on a dolly and wheel it out, and it was 7 feet tall. The people that wrote it don't know what was in it, and the people that are reading it don't know what's in it. So that's why I can confidently predict today, what cannot work won't work. Now, what are the Democrats doing? Well, they're trying to change the subject. Wouldn't you? We can't let them get away with it. It is the subject and will remain the subject. Hold them accountable. That's why we have elections in this country. They're about accountability. Make them defend their policies. Make them prove their policies are good for the women of this country and their families. They can't do that. They can't do that. And then when they can't, remind people that the Republican Party has always been the party that best represents the interest of women. Remind them that in keeping with our party's founding belief in equality for all, it was a group of Republicans that held the nation's first convention for women's rights, and that ours was the first major party to get behind women's suffrage and the principle of equal pay for equal work. Remind them that the 19th Amendment was first proposed by a Republican and defeated by a Congress that was controlled by Democrats, and that it wasn't for another 40 long years, after multiple defeats by Senate Democrats, that Republicans finally took control of Congress and passed the amendment that gave women the right to vote. Remind them that of the 12 states that had given women full suffrage before the 19th Amendment, every one of them was Republican. Every one. The first woman elected to Congress was a Republican. That's a proud heritage, and I want to thank you all again for preserving it and carrying it into the future, because the struggle for opportunity and equality continues. And whether it was women's suffrage or civil rights or slavery, our party, the Republican Party, has always had it right. And you know, I'm confident that on the great issues of today, history will deliver a similar verdict. You know, Democrats are awfully good at dividing people and pitting them against each other. That's the strategy. It's how they win elections. It's how the president got reelected. He's the divider in chief. They get a nice assist from the labor unions, although as I indicated, the unions are a little bit unhappy right now. And the teachers' unions, and the trial lawyers, among others, but they've been playing the divide and conquer game for years. And even if we wanted to, we'd never beat them at that game, and that's not a game we want to play in any way. We prefer a different course. We think everybody should have the same shot at success. Not a special carve-out, not preferential treatment. Everybody ought to have the same shot at success. Republicans naturally tend to treat everybody alike. It's a principle I've tried to adhere to over the years, both legislatively and with my staff. And honestly, it's always served me very well. Common sense always told me that if a woman does the same work as a man, she should get paid the same wage. And if she wants more flexibility at work, she should get it. He's always told me that if a woman wants to serve in the military, she should have that chance. That's why I got behind legislation more than 2 decades ago to allow female Air Force pilots to fly combat missions. And I'm proud to see that all those years later, our nation's first female fighter pilot to fly combat missions is now running for Congress in Arizona. And Martha McSally is going to win that race because I'll tell you why. Because any woman who flew more than 100 combat missions and led a combat squadron over Iraq is not likely to give up very easily. Common sense is what told me when I chaired the ethics committee back in the 90s, when I learned all the details of how one of my colleagues in my party was sexually harassing female staffers back in the 90s, that he should be kicked out of the Senate. Because nobody should be harassed or humiliated or demeaned by a superior and get away with it. By the way, down here in Kentucky, that's an issue that seems not to have penetrated terribly deeply over in state government. I've championed things like the adoption tax credit, the dependent care tax credit, the marriage penalty relief, and education tax credits. I've been clear and consistent in my voice in support of educational choice and an early supporter of college savings plans which allow families to save tax-free for their children's education. I know I'm beginning to sound here like I'm patting myself on the back, but I want to tell you something else. Common sense is the reason more than half of the people on my staff in Washington, including my chief of staff, are women. My standard's always been simple. When it comes to policy, I don't ask what's best for the unions or for growing the government or the bureaucracy. I ask what's best for individuals and the families who elected me. When it comes to my own staff, this is the issue of do you practice what you preach? In terms of my own staff, I want the best. And more often than not, the best person I could find for the job at hand was a woman. Let me tell you, when I first ran for the Senate, there weren't a lot of women campaign managers, but mine was. There weren't a lot of female chiefs of staff in the Senate back then either, but mine was. And today, most Senate offices aren't majority female, but mine is. You know what? They were the best people for the job. So look, my point is this. We don't have to feel like we have to imitate the games that Democrats play. Don't play that game. Because America needs a party that believes in a level playing field for everybody, that doesn't carve us up into groups and pit us against each other with promises of special favors. The good news is that a new generation of Americans is waking up to the deceptions on the other side. They realize that government can't continue to grow without constricting our liberties. They realize that Washington's gotten completely and totally out of control. They see this administration's excesses, the regulations, the government takeovers, the disregard for the rule of law, the dangerous weakness and abdication of American power on the world stage, the rising inequality, and the dimming prospects for young people across the country. That is the record of the Obama years. They need to be stopped. Well, the American people are about to rise up. Many of the brightest stars and best minds and fiercest fighters on our side right now are women. I just mentioned Martha McSally. There are others when it comes to smart, charismatic Republicans in blue states that know how to take on unions and win elections. Most people think of New Jersey. They should think about the governor of New Mexico, too, because Susana Martinez is a fantastic Republican governor. And when people think of up-and-coming conservative leaders, they should start thinking more about Mia Love. I've gotten to know her a little bit the last couple of years, and she's an all-star. When people think about smart, principled, conservative women who should know how to win elections in tough states, you couldn't do better than Kelly Ayotte in New Hampshire. She's been a great addition to our team in the Senate. We have other women. The reason I single those out is they win in tough states. We, of course, have to win everywhere, but we need to win in tough states if we're going to be a majority. And I think of other women over in the House like Renee Elmers and Martha Roby, just to name a few. There must be Alabama back there. Now, look, they may beat us in numbers at the moment on women in Congress, but they never beat us in smarts. Never. So, look, I'm optimistic about the future. If America's going to be tomorrow what it has been in the past, there have to be opportunities for everybody. Not carve-outs for a few, but opportunities for everybody. And if there's anything the Republican Party has stood for over the years, it's equal opportunity for everybody. Everybody. As I mentioned earlier, this administration has done incredible damage to our country. They've divided us up into groups. They've demonized success. I mean, the whole notion of earned success, that it's a good thing to be successful, has been under attack. As this bureaucracy on steroids has descended all across the private sector in our country, their view has been if you're making a profit, you're up to no good. Why you must be cheating your customers or mistreating your employees or both, and they're here to help you. And Republican women, that is the reason we've had the slowest recovery after a deep recession since World War II. The government itself. Now I see my friend Allison Ball sitting over here. She's from Floyd County, Kentucky, and for those of you who don't know where that is the heart of coal country. This administration has created a depression, that's with a D, a depression in my state, a government-induced depression, which is eliminating coal jobs, driving up utility rates, and ruining my state. And I tell you, people like Allison Ball and Mitch McConnell are not going to take it. We're going to take the fight to them next year and take back this country. So I've gone on long enough. But I can't tell you how thrilled I am to see you in Kentucky. And how proud I am of all you have accomplished. And I want to end on this note. Winston Churchill once said, America always does the right thing after it's tried everything else. I view the Obama years as the everything else. So, Republican women of America, their days are numbered. The Constitution makes sure of that. And we have one more election. One more election before this seemingly endless period comes to a close. And we're going to elect a Republican Senate to join a Republican House in 2014 and finish the job of stopping this administration's assault on America. Thank you so much.